Welcome to Etla Talks. Our guest is today researcher Paolo Fornaro from Etla. Welcome.
Thank you for having me here.
So today in economic research we are talking more and more about nowcasting instead of forecasting. What is nowcasting?
Okay, it's interesting that you mentioned both forecasting and nowcasting, because forecasting has been done in economics for 100 years since macroeconomics started, and economists have always been interested in knowing where the economy is going, which trend in a year from now. But in the last 15 years, it felt like the economists have realized that we lack information on the current state of the economy, because Statistical Institute that publishes the official estimates of where the economy is right now, they take a couple of months also to publish their official figures of GDP, for example.
Or even longer sometimes.
Yeah, even longer. So if we're talking about the yearly estimate of GDP, they can take much longer. And another issue is that they are heavily revised over time. So the economists have started to become interested in seeing if we can use some statistical models to give us a clear picture or a clearer picture at least of where the economy is right now. And that came nowcasting.
And how does it differ in methods? How can you get the present state of economy quicker with nowcasting than in forecasting?
Yeah, the idea is that in forecasting, usually economists rely on these so-called structural models, where you try to model the structure of the economy, so how the various agents interact, in a way that then you can better model how policies are going to impact the dynamics of the economy in years to come. While in nowcasting, usually economists try to gather as much data as possible, as many data sources as possible, and try to use some models that can handle large information sets to give to summarize the information contained in the data and give us an estimate of the economy. So it's kind of a different philosophy, let's say.
Now, why is it so much more relevant today than it used to be?
Good question. Maybe I think one reason is because econometricians have started to develop models, a statistical model that can handle a lot of information at the same time. Because usually statistical model, if you feed too many variables inside the model, they tend to produce poor forecast, the traditional models. But then in the beginning of the 2000s, econometricians started to develop some sort of some methodologies that can handle even hundreds of variables and still produce good estimates or predictions. And from that, people have realized, economists have realized that we can use that kind of models to produce nowcast or like.
And which organizations are using mostly the nowcasting at the moment?
Only if we talk, over the world, a lot of organizations, central banks in US, the European Central Bank. If we talk about Finland, for example, the Bank of Finland uses a nowcasting model. Etla and the Statistics Finland produce flash estimates of the trend indicator of output and of GDP. But then also a lot of private companies use it also like in their own internal nowcast. They use some nowcasting model. It's very common right now.
So would you say that the nowcasting is becoming more and more important compared to forecasting, or are they still both relevant?
I think they are both very different. They are very relevant, both of them, and very different in their approach and the use of it.
But still, what are the benefits of nowcasting?
Well, the benefits are fairly self-evident, because then if a government or let's say a private company has a better idea of where the economy is right now, then they can target the policies, or they can, a company can figure out if it's worth to make an investment right now, knowing where the economy is, or it can, some short-term decision making can be impacted a lot by what kind of idea you have of the macroeconomy right now.
So you have a clearer picture where you are at the moment.
Yes,
so you have the map, and then you see, okay, we are now here.
That's a good metaphor.
Yeah. And how do you see this nowcasting develop in the future?
Well, I think there can be two strengths where it's going to, because of course, with new data sets becoming available, then nowcasting can try to develop methods that can use this information and give us more reliable estimates, and even quicker than right now. Then I think the other interesting avenues of research and development for nowcasting is to try to figure out how to use these large information sets and unify it with a clearer idea of the structure of the economy in a way that right now many nowcasting models are pretty much black boxes. We know, like, they give us an estimate of GDP, but we are not 100% sure why they gave it to us. There are some attempts in ease this problem, but I think that could be a nice avenue to try to give us a clearer picture of why we get a certain GDP nowcast, let's say. And
what about the effects of digitalization? We will get more and more different data points and information sources. How will that affect nowcasting?
Yeah, this relates to the first point I made, that it's going to be with more data. I think there is a better potential getting more accurate pictures of the economy even faster than right now.
Any examples of that?
For example, with Statistics Phil and Etla, we have been trying to use traffic data to give us early estimates of the Finnish economy, which is that's a typical big data example, something not related strictly to economic variables. The data that we gather from is fairly, let's say, messy in a way, so you need to adjust the data, typical of big data issues.
Maybe also the usage of taxis could be one.
The taxes, well, that can be an example, or Google searches have been used to nowcast unemployment. In Etla, we have this project both for unemployment and house prices, for example. So, the data sources are becoming more and more, wider, like price from a supermarket scanner data, for example. They've been used for inflation nowcast.
Now, when you get more and more data points, what are the risks included?
Well, I think for now, the risk is always that, you lose interpretability of the model, of course. If you start to add more and more variables, you might get accurate estimates of the GDP, but then you don't know why exactly, which variable has led the model to give us the kind of prediction. But at the same time, it's a trade-off. Maybe for nowcasting, it's fine just to get a clear, accurate prediction rather than an interpretable one. And then the risk is, that some models might start to become more, when there is too much noise in the data, the prediction might suffer too. So that's another risk.
And now when we're talking about big data and digitalization, we have to talk about artificial intelligence as well. What will its role be in the future? Well,
artificial intelligence, if we want to take, it's kind of has been in the pictures already in a way, because many of these statistical models, when I say they are black boxes, the idea is that the researcher doesn't need to put much input of its own judgment inside the model. You just give a lot of data to this model, and then it's going to produce a prediction. These are, for example, like machine learning models are a good example of it. So artificial intelligence in the, let's say, wider definition of it has been already involved in nowcasting.
How is it going to develop in the future, the role of AI?
I'm not 100% sure, but I think, I think it's just it might help us in not having to, selecting the key variables that will help in nowcasting. That can be useful without the researcher needing to look through the variable list and see, okay, this one, it's important, this one is not, the machine probably is going to be.
So finally, will the research and forecasting with nowcasting, will it help you to predict the future? Is it going to be easier in the future?
I think the future is going to be still is very hard to predict, unfortunately. It's and that's why I think, for example, that we are talking to AI and these big data models. I think those are going to impact less forecasting, because there it's still very important. The human judgment is still very important. I think it's going to stay important for a long time at least.
So the AI cannot replace the human?
No, I don't think for forecasting. Not right now. But I don't think even in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you.